Hello, everybody. This is the 12 Dancing Princesses. Once upon a time, there lived in the village of Montigny-sur-Roc a little cowboy, without either father or mother. His real name was Michael, but he always was called the Stargazer, because when he drove his cows over the commons to seek for pasture, he went along with his head in the air. As he had a white skin, blue eyes, and hair that curled all over his head, the village girls used to cry after him, "Well, Stargazer, what are you doing?" And Michael would answer, "Oh, nothing," and go on his way without even turning to look at them. One morning, about the middle of August, just at midday when the sun was hottest, Michael ate his dinner of a piece of dry bread and went to sleep under an oak. And he dreamt that a beautiful lady, dressed in a robe of cloth of gold, came and said to him, "Go to the castle of Belloil, and there you shall marry a princess." That evening the little cowboy told his dream to the farm people, but, as was natural, they only laughed at the Stargazer. The next day, at the same hour, he went to sleep again under the same tree. The lady appeared to him a second time and said, "Go to the castle of Belloil, and you shall marry a princess." In the evening Michael told his friends that he had dreamed the same dream again, but they only laughed at him more than before. "Never mind," he said to himself. "If the lady appears to me a third time, I will do as she tells me." The following day, to the great astonishment of all the village, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a voice was heard singing, "Rally-o, rally-o, how the cattle go." It was the little cowboy driving his herd back to the byre. The farmer began to scold him furiously, but he answered quietly, "I am going away." He made his clothes into a bundle and said goodbye to all his friends, and boldly set out to seek his fortune. There was great excitement through all the village, and on the top of the hill the people stood, holding their sides with laughing, as they watched the Stargazer trudging bravely along the valley with his bundle at the end of his stick. It was well known for full 20 miles round that in the castle of Belloil lived 12 princesses of wonderful beauty, as proud as they were beautiful, and so sensitive and of such truly royal blood that they would have felt at once the presence of a pea in their beds, even if the mattresses were laid over it. They had 12 beds, all in the same room, but what was very extraordinary was the fact that, though they were locked in by triple bolts every morning, their satin shoes were worn into holes. No noise was ever heard in the room, yet the shoes could not wear themselves out alone. At last the Duke of Belloil ordered the trumpet to be sounded, and a proclamation made that whoever could discover how his daughters wore out their shoes should choose one of them for his wife. On hearing the proclamation, a number of princes arrived at the castle to try their luck. They watched all night behind the open door of the princesses, but when the morning came they had all disappeared, and no one could tell what had become of them. When he reached the castle, Michael went straight to the gardener and offered his services. Now it happened the garden boy had just been sent away, and though the Stargazer did not look very sturdy, the gardener agreed to take him, as he had thought the pretty face and golden curls would please the princesses. The first thing he was to do, when the princesses awoke, was to present each one with a bouquet. So Michael placed himself behind the door of the princess's room, with the 12 bouquets in a basket. He gave one to each of the sisters, who took them without even deigning to look at the lad, except Lena, the youngest, who fixed on him her large black eyes, soft as velvet, and exclaimed, "Oh, how pretty he is, our new flower boy." The rest all burst out laughing, and the eldest said that a princess ought never to lower herself by looking at a garden boy. Now Michael knew all the princesses had disappeared, but the beautiful eyes of Princess Lena inspired him with a violent longing to try his fate. Unhappily, he did not dare to come forward, being afraid that he should only be jeered at, or even turned away from the castle on account of his impudence. Then the Stargazer had another dream. The lady in the golden dress appeared to him once more, holding in one hand 2 young laurel trees, a cherry tree and a rose laurel, and in the other hand a little golden rake, a little golden bucket, and a silken towel. She said, "Plant these 2 laurels in 2 large pots. Rake them over with the rake, water them with the bucket, and wipe them with the towel. When they have grown as tall as a girl of 15, say to each of them, 'My beautiful laurel, with the golden rake I have raked you, with the golden bucket I have watered you, with the silken towel I have wiped you.' Then after that, ask anything you choose, and the laurels will give it to you." Michael thanked the lady of the golden dress, and when he woke he found the 2 laurel bushes beside him, so he carefully obeyed the orders and gave him by the lady. The trees grew very fast, and when they were as tall as a girl of 15, he said to the cherry laurel, "My lovely cherry laurel, with a golden rake I have raked you, with a golden bucket I have watered you, with a silken towel I have wiped you. Teach me how to become invisible." Instantly there appeared on the laurel a pretty white flower, which Michael gathered and stuck into his buttonhole. That evening, when the princesses went upstairs to bed, he followed them barefoot so that he would make no noise, and hid himself under one of the 12 beds. The princesses began at once to open their wardrobes and boxes. They took out of them the most magnificent dresses, which they had put on before their mirrors, turning themselves all round to admire their appearance. Michael could see nothing from his hiding place, but he could hear everything, and he listened to the princesses laughing and talking with pleasure. At last the eldest said, "Be quick, my sisters, our partners will be impatient." When the stargazer peeped out, he saw the 12 sisters in splendid garments, with satin shoes on their feet, and in their hands the bouquets he had brought them. "Are you ready?" asked the eldest. "Yes," replied the other 11 in chorus, and they took their places one by one behind her. Then the eldest princess clapped her hands 3 times, and a trap door appeared. All the princesses disappeared down a secret staircase, and Michael hastily followed them. As he was following on the footsteps of Princess Lena, he carefully trod on her dress. "There is someone behind me," cried the princess, "holding my dress." "You foolish thing," said the eldest sister. "You are always afraid of something. It is only a nail which caught you." They went down, 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 till at last they came to a passage with a door at one end, which was only fastened with a latch. The eldest princess opened it, and found themselves immediately in a lovely little wood, where the leaves were spangled with drops of silver, which shone in the brilliant light of the moon. Next they crossed another wood, where the leaves were sprinkled with gold, and after that still another, where the leaves glittered with diamonds. At last the stargazer perceived a large lake, and on the shore were 12 little boats with awnings, in which were scattered 12 princes, who, grasping their oars, awaited the princesses. Each princess entered one of the boats, and Michael slipped in with the youngest. The boats glided along rapidly, but Lena's, being heavier, was always behind the rest. "We never went so slowly before," said the princess. "What can be the reason?" "I don't know," answered the prince. "I assure you I am rowing as hard as I can." On the other side of the lake the garden boy saw a beautiful castle, splendidly illuminated, whence came the lively music of fiddles and kettle drums and trumpets. In a moment they touched land, and the company jumped out of the boats. The princes, after having securely fastened their barks, gave their arms to the princesses and conducted themselves to the castle. Michael followed and entered the bar-room and the train. Everywhere were mirrors, lights, flowers, and damask hangings. The stargazer went quite bewildered at the magnificence of the sight. He placed himself out of the way in a corner, admiring the grace and beauty of the princesses. Some were fair and some were dark, some had chestnut hair or curls darker still, and some had golden locks. Never were so many beautiful princesses seen together at one time, but the one the garden boy thought the most beautiful and the most fascinating was the little princess with the velvet eyes. With what eagerness she danced! Leaning on her partner's shoulder, she swept by like a whirlwind. Her cheeks flushed, her eyes sparkled, and it was plain that she loved dancing better than anything else. The poor garden boy envied those handsome young men with whom she danced so gracefully, but did not know how little reason he had to be jealous of them. The young men were really the princes who, to the number of 50 at least, had tried to steal the princess's secret. The princesses had made them drink a philtre which froze the heart and left nothing but the love of dancing. They danced on till the shoes of the princesses were worn into holes. When the cock crowed the 3rd time, the fiddles stopped, and a delicious supper was served, of sugared orange flowers, crystallized rose leaves, powdered violets, cracknels, and wafers, which are, as everyone knows, the favorite food of princesses. After supper, the dancers all went back to their boats, and this time the stargazer entered that of the eldest princess. They crossed again the wood with the diamond-spangled leaves, and wood with the gold-sprinkled leaves, and the wood whose leaves glittered with drops of silver, and as a proof of what he had seen, the boy broke a small branch from a tree in the last wood. Lena turned as she heard the noise made by the breaking of the branch. "What was that noise?" she asked. "It was nothing," replied the eldest sister. "It was only the screech of the barn owl that roosts in one of the turrets of the castle." While she was speaking, Michael managed to slip ahead, and running up the staircase, he reached the princess's room first. He flung open the window and, sliding down the vine, which climbed up the wall, found himself in the garden just as the sun was beginning to rise, and it was time for him to set to his work. That day, when he made up the bouquets, Michael hid the branch with the silver drops in the nosegay intended for the youngest princess. When Lena discovered it, she was much surprised. However, she said nothing to her sisters, but as she met the boy while she was walking under the shade of the elms, she suddenly stopped as if to speak to him. Then, changing her mind, she went on her way. In the evening, the 12 sisters went to the ball, and the stargazer again followed them and crossed the lake in Lena's boat. This time it was the prince who complained that the boat seemed very heavy. "It is the heat," replied the princess. "I, too, have been feeling very warm." During the ball, she looked everywhere for the garden boy, but she never saw him. As they came back, Michael gathered a branch from the wood with the gold-spangled leaves, and now it was the eldest princess who heard the noise, and it made in breaking. "It's nothing," said Lena, "only the cry of the owl which roosts in the turrets of the castle." The next morning, Lena found the branch in her bouquet. When the sisters went down, she stayed a little behind and said to the garden boy, "Where does this branch come from?" "Your Royal Highness knows well enough," answered Michael. "So you have followed us?" "Yes, Princess." "How did you manage it? We never saw you." "I hid myself," replied the stargazer quietly. The princess was silent a moment and then said, "You know our secret. Keep it. Here is the reward for your discretion." And she flung the boy a purse of gold. "I do not sell my silence," answered Michael, and he went away without picking up the purse. For 3 nights Lena neither saw nor heard anything extraordinary. On the 4th she heard a rustling among the diamond-spangled leaves of the wood. The next day there was a branch of the trees in her bouquet. She took the stargazer aside and said to him in a harsh voice, "You know what price my father has promised to pay for our secrets?" "I know, Princess," answered Michael. "Don't you mean to tell him?" "That's not my intention." "Are you afraid?" "No, Princess." "What makes you so discreet, then?" But Michael was silent. Lena's sister had seen her talking to the garden boy and jeered at her for it. "What prevents your marrying him?" asked the eldest. "You would become a gardener, too. It is a charming profession. You could live in a cottage at the end of the park and help your husband draw up water from the well, and you could bring us our bouquets." The Princess Lena was very angry, and when the stargazer presented her bouquet, she received it in a disdainful manner. Michael behaved most respectfully. He never raised his eyes to her, but nearly all day she felt him at her side without ever seeing him. One day she made up her mind to tell everything to her eldest sister. "What?" said she. "This rogue knows our secret, and you never told me? I must lose no time in getting rid of him." "But how?" "Why, by having him taken to the tower with the dungeons, of course." For this was the way in old times, that beautiful princesses rid themselves of people who knew too much. But the astonishing part of it was that the younger sister did not seem at all to relish this method of stopping the mouth of the garden boy, who, after all, had said nothing to their father. They agreed to ask the other 10 sisters. All were on the side of the eldest. Then the youngest sister declared that, if they laid a finger on the garden boy, she would herself go and tell their father the secret of the holes in their shoes. At last it was decided that Michael should be put to the test. They would take him to the ball, and at the end of supper would give him the philter which was to enchant him like the rest. They sent for the stargazer and asked him how he had contrived to learn their secret, but he remained silent. Then, in commanding tones, the eldest sister gave him the order they agreed upon. He only answered, "I will obey." He had been present and visible at the council of princesses and had heard all, but he made up his mind to drink of the philter and sacrifice himself for the happiness of her beloved. Not wishing, however, to cut a poor figure at the ball by the side of the other dancers, he went on once to the laurels and said, "My lovely rose laurel, with a golden rake I have raked you, with a golden bucket I have watered you, with a silken towel I have dried you. Dress me like a prince." A beautiful pink flower appeared. Michael gathered it, and in a moment found himself clothed in velvet, which was as black as the eyes of the little princess, with a cap to match, a diamond aigrette, and the blossom of the rose laurel in his buttonhole. Thus dressed, he presented himself that evening before the Duke of Belloil, and obtained leave to try and discover his daughter's secret. He looked so distinguished that hardly anyone would have known who he was. The 12 princesses went upstairs to bed. Michael followed them and waited behind the open door till they gave him the signal for departure. This time he did not cross in Lena's boat. He gave his arm to the eldest sister, danced with each in turn, and was so graceful that everyone was delighted with him. At last the time came for him to dance with the little princess. She found him the best partner in the world, but he did not dare speak a single word to her. When he was taking her back to her place, she said to him in a mocking voice, "Here you are, at the summit of your wishes, and you are being treated like a prince." "Don't be afraid," replied the stargazer gently. "You shall never be a gardener's wife." The little princess stared at him with a frightened face, and he left her without waiting for an answer. When the satin slippers were worn through, the fiddles stopped, and they were at the banquet table. Michael was placed next to the eldest sister and opposite the youngest. They gave him the most exquisite dishes to eat and the most delicate wines to drink, and in order to turn his head more completely, compliments and flattery were heaped on him from every side. At last the eldest sister made a sign, and one of the pages brought in a large golden cup. "The enchanted castle has no more secrets for you," she said to the stargazer. "Let us drink to your triumph." He cast a lingering glance at the little princess, and without hesitation lifted the cup. "Don't drink," suddenly cried out the little princess. "I would rather marry a gardener," and she burst into tears. Michael flung the contents of the cup before him, sprang over the table, and fell at Lena's feet. The rest of the princes fell likewise at the knees of the princesses, each of whom chose a husband and raised him to her side. The charm was broken. The 12 couples embarked in the boats, which crossed back many times in order to carry over the other princes. Then they all went through the 3 woods, and when they had passed the door of the underground passage, a great noise was heard, as if the enchanted castle was crumbling to the earth. They went straight to the room of the Duke of Belloil, who had just awakened. Michael held in his hand the golden cup, and he revealed the secret of the holes in the shoes. "Choose, then," said the Duke, "whichever one you prefer." "My choice is already made," replied Michael, and he offered his hand to the youngest princess, who blushed and lowered her eyes. The Princess Lena did not become a gardener's wife. On the contrary, it was the stargazer who became a prince. But before the marriage ceremony, the princess insisted that Michael tell her how he came to discover the secret. So he showed her the 2 laurels which had helped him, and she, being a prudent girl, and thinking they gave him too much advantage over his wife, cut them off at the root and threw them into the fire. And that is why the country girls go about singing, "Nous n'irons plus au bois, les lauriers sont coupés," and dancing in the summer by the light of the moon.